Hi people. So this may be a different look. Perhaps you don't often see me with my glasses. In fact, I hardly ever wear them in videos. But I'm actually multitasking. As I'm making this video, I'm watching a slideshow of old photos. Just it was playing anyway, and I can't be bothered to take it out. So yeah, it's on the TV, so I need the glasses for that. But actually, I will take them off just for the purpose of this video. And I can actually probably put this on. Yeah, there we go. Pause. Um, Yeah, so this is kind of a part two, I guess, to the video I made on Lawrence Fox, Dan Wootton, and the journalist Ava Evans. The video only got about 30 views. Honestly, it's difficult to tell which of my videos will get a lot of traction and which won't. I mean, the one I made on the Sycamore Gap tree in Northumberland has about 750 views, so there's really no way to know, even though this is also a topical thing. It's got a lot of discussion right now. But one of the comments there, and I hope you won't mind me quoting you here, but Paul Wally, you made an interesting observation, and I hope you don't mind me quoting this because I think it's useful really for the topic of this video. What you said was misandry pushes men arguably towards right wing politics. Now, that's an interesting talking point, actually, and it's something I want to discuss a little bit. Before I do that, I'm going to show people the I newspaper. This is from the 28th of September. Now, the I obviously is a left wing newspaper, centre left, not quite as hard left as the Guardian, but it's definitely to the left overall, and their coverage of this. So I'll try and focus, keep this stable. If you maybe go back a few seconds in the video and just pause that, you can see the individual articles. The reason I'm showing this is because they have a double page coverage of this, and every single segment is very negative and critical of Fox and Wooten. Um, so let's see. Fox must never return to airwaves on GB News, say station staff. That's by Adam Sherwin. Tory MPs still free to appear on network, by Chloe Chaplin. Abuse was unacceptable, says Evans, by Ewan O'Byrne Mulligan. Comment: Fox seems to have a problem with women. This is by Cassia Delgado. Comment: Channel is a purveyor of muck, not news, by Ian Dunt. So there is zero attempt by the I newspaper to show any sense of balance. It's entirely negative. This terrible, evil GB News, and look at the misogyny that's condemned that. And I have a problem with this because they don't even attempt to, for example, quote the fact that Wooten and Fox were talking about Ava Evans' comments on Question Time regarding male suicide and her positions on that. They don't even bother reporting that. To me, it's a failure of journalism. Now, as someone who aspires to get into the industry, maybe it's not a good idea to be criticizing a newspaper because I might well want, work with them. And, at this stage, I have to be practical. I have to just reach out to wherever I can get work. So maybe criticizing the eye for that is, shooting myself in the foot. But I think it has to be said. I think the collective media, the way they cover misogyny is versus misandry, it's so uneven. So uneven. But what I find interesting is that even on the Independent's YouTube channel, you know, that's the Independent, their online sister paper. That's a left wing outlet, so you would expect them to be, the comments to be full of, Fox's misogynist. Actually, it was 50-50. There were a lot of people calling out her misandry. Um, and this is true. Everywhere I've seen this story on social media, whatever outlet it is, the majority of opinions have actually been criticizing her. Comments like she's very annoying, she's self-aggrandizing, she's milking it, and why has no one called out her misandry? Now I think that's interesting because it shows that there's a disconnect between the editorial positions and what the collective news media the angle that they're pushing versus what the public actually think. Now, I've no doubt there are a lot of people out there who are convinced that Fox is a terrible misogynist. Um, my own views on Fox, I'll just say this briefly. I certainly don't agree with all of his positions, um, particularly on issues around COVID and some other issues that he's come out with. But other issues, I think he's spot on. Um, but because he doesn't fit this very narrow woke narrative, then he must be far right. Because he's dared to stray away from that. He's now known as the actor who had that controversial appearance on Question Time, where he made the crime of not apologising for being a white straight male. So therefore, he's a radicalised right winger. I'm so sick of this narrative. And like I say, I don't agree with everything he comes out with, but I do think this man has been vilified at every opportunity by people with an agenda. Um, and just to reiterate what he actually said, it was completely wrong. He shouldn't have done it, and he should know better. It was foolish. It was a missed opportunity because he could have used that segment actually to raise the issues that I'm raising here, but instead he brought it into sexist banter, and I think it was sexist. I'm not going to equivocate on that. I think it was sexist. Just talking about whether a woman's worth sleeping with or not. It's it's vulgar and it's disrespectful and it's just he really let himself down with that. But I think he knows he did. I think he knows that he missed an opportunity and he just gave feminists and the left ammo to come for his blood. But what people are overlooking about this, and it is that there is a context. I understand that Lawrence Fox has personally lost friends to suicide. And in fact, he said this, and he said that his pub banter, with Woodson was kind of the way he approached it, and he shouldn't have done it that way. Um, I think he would have made a more powerful case if he, just like I said in the last video, just said, her downplaying of this hurts me. I think it's insensitive, and I think it's quite callous. Um, but the bias is just so obvious. Now, to get back to your point, Paul Wally, does Misandry push men more to the right? Um, to some level, I would say yes, for the same reason that woke dogma more generally does. Um, I think there is some truth in observing that a lot of men, particularly younger men, perhaps have been moved to the right because they're so utterly fed up of being shamed. Um, on so many issues, particularly young white men. I mean, basically, if you are a straight white male, you're enemy number one to a woke leftist. And that might sound like hyperbole, but unless you're completely flagellating yourself in, guilt, then yeah, they will see you as public enemy number one. Really, it's not an exaggeration. Um, but I'm not sure if it's as simple as if you dislike misandry, as any self-respecting man would, then you just go to the right. I don't think it's that simple because I abhor the double standards. I abhor these feminists coming out with a misandrous bile and getting away with it. But that doesn't mean I'm automatically going to gravitate to the political right. There's still plenty of things I disagree with the political right about that are not related to the battle of the sexes. Um, I mean, I'm not going to look at something like, say, Eva Evans downplaying male suicide or another feminist journalist or commentator, and that's going to make me make excuses for Donald Trump, for example. So I don't think it's quite black and white like that. But I do think that more broadly, the intolerance of the woke left and their insufferable hypocrisy will push not just men, actually, I think women as well. I think any rational person will be thoroughly put off by it because I've seen this. I've seen people who I would call very much centrist moderates move somewhat more to the right because they're so utterly fed up with the dogma of the woke left. Now, I think it could work the other way too. I think you could get moderate conservatives who are put off by, for example, in America, the MAGA movement, Um, so it can work the other way as well. But all I want to see is a little bit of balance. I mean, by all means, misogyny should be called out. I'm fine with that. Okay, but why the hell does Misandry get a free pass? It sickens me because, and I do think downplaying men's issues is a form of misandry because it's callous. It's basically saying these things don't matter. And all the time we hear men should be more open about their mental health. Men should talk about their problems. But the whole context of this was a fellow panelist had suggested the idea of a minister for men, precisely to deal with those sort of things, just as the Minister for Women and Equalities deals with issues affecting women. That's all it was. And for that, Ava Evans was, really trying to throw water on that and say, no, no, there's no need for that. And there's a lot of feminists who have a problem with the very idea of a minister for men because their attitude is, well, men have all the power in this overbearing patriarchy. That's actually BS because if that was true, then it would be very easy to criticize feminism. If that was true, if men had all the power, then you wouldn't see situations. And this is going back a little bit, but Will Noland, a decent college, getting fired for giving a speech on the, I forget the exact title of the lecture now, but the paradox of, I forget it now, the patriarchy paradox. That was it. He gets fired for that, albeit by the male principal. But there are men out there who just basically pander to feminist demands. I'm sick of it. As a self-respecting man, I am sick of it. I will always condemn clear misogyny. That's why I do say that Fox's comments, he really let himself down with that. He shouldn't have done it. And Wooten was wrong to, laugh along like it was some sort of pub joke. I just think they missed an opportunity. So, but that's become the big news item. Why is there not a national debate about feminist journalists downplaying these things? And people might say she doesn't have the power of Fox. She's not someone who's aspired to be mayor of London, but she is absolutely milking this. She's doing interviews, she's talking about how she's been threatened. Let me just say this, if anyone has actually threatened her, that's abhorrent, it's wrong, absolutely. But I really do think that what has probably happened is she's received a lot of criticism for, her attitude, her toxic worldview, and then she just translates that as, threats. Because this has happened before. The exact same thing happened with Kathy Newman and Jordan Peterson. Newman came in really aggressively, really hostile, incredibly rude. One of the most unprofessional interviews I've ever seen. Um, Peterson, whatever you think of him, and I would certainly not call myself a devotee, but he remained calm and he answered it. But then she got criticised for that interview. But because feminists are so fragile, they can't handle criticism, and they really can't handle criticism. She interprets that as misogynistic hate. You know, um, Look at the Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing. Most people, including, by the way, most women, saw that for what it was. Um, I think they had a toxic relationship. I don't think Depp was totally innocent, but I think Amber Heard got exposed for being the domestic abuser and liar that she is. And even then, feminist columnists were talking about how women are put down, how women can't make complaints. It just they cannot fathom they cannot fathom that there may be times that women have the upper hand. They cannot fathom the idea, they cannot even entertain the idea that there may be some issues that disproportionately affect men. They just can't grasp it. And what does this do? It it pushes men onto the defensive because, if I mean I've been fortunate, I haven't personally lost friends to suicide, but I can understand if someone had. And this isn't to say, obviously suicide affects women as well. We shouldn't say it doesn't, but the majority of suicides are men. So it's just it's really, really not a level playing field. I mean, if men have all the power, why is it when a man in public life, whether they be a politician or a journalist or a commentator or a celebrity, makes an allegedly misogynistic comment, he is absolutely crucified. He loses his job, he's pilloried, you know, the, people are out for his blood, right? And maybe sometimes that's deserved. But there is not a day goes by when there isn't a journalist coming out with some rant about men in general. And as for this thing about, they were talking about sleeping with her. Well, I'm sure there has been on, say, The View or the British equivalent, Loose Women, I'm sure there's been discussions about the attractiveness of men. Okay, um, so why, why the double standards? It's just so grating, actually. So, Paul Wally, to address your point, I think there's some truth in that. I think definitely, it's like for the same reason that when Black Lives Matter talk about white privilege, that polarizes white people who might otherwise be sympathetic. For example, on the issue of police brutality. I mean, that's exactly what happened with me. I thought, okay, they've got a point here. There is a serious problem in America with police brutality and accountability of power. I think there still is, actually. And I think it's about the only good thing that's come out of BLM is that they've ignited that debate. But what did they do? They ended up just becoming a totally racist movement because they ended up just being an anti-white movement, and they can say otherwise. But when you go, I've spoken about this before, so I don't want to go over old territory, but it's the same principle. If you polarize people by just attacking the group, then it's going to push people into a corner, or it's going to push people away. It doesn't build bridges. So when feminists just have these collective rants about men or downplay men's issues, all that does, all that does is make a lot of men resentful. Now, I'm well aware that there are other men who like to virtue signal and tell feminists what they want to hear. But if you're a self-respecting man, I'm going to say this right now, if you're any sort of self-respecting man, you would take an issue with what Ava Evans and other feminists do, you know. And it's kind of subtle. I mean, she wasn't like laughing at it or something, but she was downplaying it, and that is dismissive. Imagine if you had a situation where a male politician was saying, "Oh well, rape isn't really a problem, or sexual assault against women isn't really a problem. Let's ignore that." He would be absolutely pilloried, you know. So especially in the media, the double standards between misogyny and misandry are so glaringly obvious and so profound. And this is going to push men away from, not away from women's rights necessarily, but certainly it will make them more hostile to feminists. And that's, it's not necessarily a good thing because I mean, personally, I don't call myself anti-feminist. I call myself an egalitarian. But I am critical, and I make no apology for this, over the misandry within feminism and over the glaring double standards. Um, I think, whatever legitimate arguments they have, they overshadow it with positions like this. And they will say things like, well, all things that affect men, that's a result of the patriarchy. Okay, but that's kind of a contradiction because if men have all the power, then this so-called power is going against men. So it's a contradiction. Um, it just irks me off. If anyone from the eye happens to see this video, I maintain what I say, but I think the eye is good at doing world panoramas. I like the way they do that. But if potential journalists have to fear not criticizing a newspaper or an outfit because well, we don't want to employ someone that criticizes us. My question is, can you not take criticism? Can you not have a plurality of opinion within? Because maybe I'm overthinking this, but maybe there's a lot of things I like about the eye. It's just that It is what I've said. I think that there is the way issues like this are covered are so biased, and the eye is far from the only culprit in this regard. Right, thank you, Paul Wally, for the suggestion, but that's my thoughts. Basically, I think it's true to some extent. I think it will push me. I mean, I suppose I should just close with one thought. It's not necessarily a case that feminists are a domain of the left. I mean, definitely, this whole trans feminist battle has probably, ironically, pushed some feminist women to the right. You know, we're living in upside down times now. I mean, J.K. Rowling, right? I would say she's long been a left wing figure. She's a feminist, not by any means the most militant feminist I've seen, but she is a feminist. And yeah, she's now public enemy number one with the trans community. You know, she's been utterly vilified. And no doubt there's been people on the left have now labelled her a right wing radical because of her views on biology. And that's one thing I'm with the feminists on. I think they're absolutely right. But ironically, you know, this is where cultural wars go. It just pushes people to extremes because it pushes people. I mean, I'm not saying J.K. Rowling's extreme. I'm saying that her critics are, because when you're just generalizing, when you're just attacking the group, then the group becomes defensive. So you know, you attack white people won't like it. You attack men won't like it, and so on. You attack women won't like it. Think of the trans community. So it's just it's just tiresome. But I think these issues are important because it continues. And I think I do a tiny little bit here, but it has to be called out. Has to be called out. There has to be some degree of balance. So what I would say to the I is, by all means, you know, critique the misogyny, but at least, for goodness sake, at least give some context. At least talk about. I'm not saying justification. I'm saying context. Fox and Wooten were referring to an episode of Question Time where Ava Evans said this, and that was controversial, but they won't even mention it. So they're spinning a misleading narrative, actually, because that would imply, well, they just came out with a sexist banter like out of the blue, just for fun. And I don't think that's the case. I think, like Fox himself has said, it's the way he approached his frustration and hurt at her position. He'd done it the wrong way, but that's what he's explained, and I think that's probably true.